Computer. Okay, hey everyone, and welcome to the Department of Biology Careers in Biology seminar series. And I'm so pleased to have to be the host of this. And our guest today is Michelle Murrin. She has a bachelor's degree in environmental biology from the University of Dayton in 2020. And she did an honors thesis actually in my research lab and published that. So as a first author, which is really awesome. And then graduated and went to Miami University where she did a master's degree, graduating from there in 2022. Was it in ecology? What would it be?
Biology.
In biology. And since then, she's been a consultant working for Bowser Morner. And she's going to talk today about her journey as a graduate from our program. So help me welcome Michelle.
Well, thanks everyone. It's very exciting to be up here because I was there like 4 years ago, only 4 years ago. This is really cool. Thanks, Dr. McEwen, for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about what I do at my job in environmental consulting. I do a little bit of all these three of these things, but I want to start by stressing I am not a professional engineer. I do not have an engineering degree. I do not have a geology degree, but I do dabble in some of that. So I will talk about that, but keep that in mind. I'm not an engineer. Yeah, I'm an environmental scientist too. I actually got promoted after a year, which was super exciting and unexpected. So let's get started. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about my time at UD. I started here in 2016. I was here for 4 years, well, 3, and we'll get into that. I went to Hawaii with PK. Did any of you have PK? Or was he here while you were here? Yeah. So I went to Hawaii with him. I don't think they do that trip anymore, which is sad. For 3 weeks, left me on the top of Diamond Head. That was a really cool experience. I was in the marching band here all 4 years. That's actually Emily. She was one of my bridesmaids. I think she actually gave a career seminar here last year about AmeriCorps at Cincinnati Zoo. So I made a lot of friends through that. My summer of my sophomore year, my internship was with the Delaware Nature Society. I actually grew up in the state of Delaware, so I went back home for the summer and had a really awesome experience. Spent a lot of time with macroinvertebrates. If any of you are river stewards, you've already seen me a few times because Zach just brings me in to talk about macros every once in a while. So then that was a really cool experience because I was starting to work on this project here. I was kind of taking it over, looking at macroinvertebrates relating to their density and the density of honeysuckle along streams and whether or not that was impacting the macroinvertebrate community in these small streams. And so with that, my sophomore year, I started working on that a little bit and basically learned a little bit of macroinvertebrate identification down to like the order level, so pretty basic. And then I went into this internship and they were like, we've never had someone come in with that experience. We're going to go a step further. You'll be able to identify a lot of these to family. And so that was awesome to bring that experience to that internship. And then I brought it back to my research and we were able to go more in depth with that, which helped put together the paper. So it was a really cool positive feedback loop of research to internship experience back to research. Like Ryan mentioned, I did an honors thesis that ended up getting published thanks to the help of a lot of people. It was a project that went for a really long time. I kind of tied up the pieces for it, and that's published in Biological Invasions. If anyone needs to do, I don't know if you've already chosen your papers for your 299 or 420, but if you're allowed to do a paper from UD and you want to do it, like I'd be happy to chat about it. So yeah, college was really fun. And then spring semester of my senior year, a really fun thing happened called 2020, and including some other unfortunate circumstances that led up to it. But there's me graduating. I rented a cap and gown, or I borrowed it from random friends we found on Facebook because UD said, you're going to go home for 2 weeks. There's this thing called coronavirus, and you're going to come back after 2 weeks, after spring break. And so I said, oh, I'll leave my cap and gown at UD. I grew up 500 miles away. So I had to rent one, and then that's technically, I think, a nurse's, like, whatever, nursing, because it's close enough, because we had a friend who was a nursing major. And you'll see here, I'm actually holding a University of Dayton diploma. My mom actually went to UD and was a bio major here, so I held her diploma for the picture. And there's me standing in because remember, I'm 4th generation. So I'm standing in my parents' yard. So that was kind of an unfortunate end to my senior year. But otherwise, it was really fun until then. And then right after that, luckily, I had something lined up already. And I had committed to Miami for my master's. It took me about a little over 2 years to finish that. I worked up in the Poconos. in Northeast Pennsylvania, if anybody's familiar with that area. It's really cool. I joined a lab and I worked on lakes. So that was my office. It was awesome. These really pretty glacial lakes, saw bears, rescued an injured porcupine. If you want to talk about that later, we can. That was fun. I studied this organism here. It's a little crustacean. So zooplankton, if any of you are familiar, cladoceran, if any of you have taken invertebrate zoology, kind of like a cousin to the shrimp. And then my title of my master's thesis was, does lake browning protect the cladoceran and Polypedium glacialis from UV radiation in the surface waters of lakes? The answer is yes. We can talk about that more if you're interested. I did grad school all through COVID, so that was very interesting, being in grad school during COVID, trying not to get sick from undergrads, because I was teaching in labs. One thing that was really cool about my time at Miami is I actually signed up to teach field botany because I didn't want to teach intro labs, and they actually gave it to me. I didn't know anything about plants, but I just learned because I did macros, zooplankton, a lot of aquatic stuff. I learned I really like field botany, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that's been a benefit in my career. I got to teach that. And then in May of 2022, I walked at graduation. I defended my thesis like a week after that. But I walked at graduation. There's a guy there. I'll talk more about that. And then, so wait. I walked at graduation, and then I went on a conference to Grand Rapids for a week. Then I came back. I was there for a week. Then I came back, and then I defended my thesis. And this whole time I was planning this really big party. So that was kind of stressful. And yeah, that happened. So 3 weeks after I defended my thesis, I got married. So I was busy. I actually did not even look for a job at that point because Isaac works at the Air Force Base and he's an engineer, he makes real money. So I was like, I'm just not gonna deal with that right now. Because then I had to move back to Dayton. So then over the summer, I started applying to jobs, and that's how I landed here. I already had to move back to Dayton, so I had to basically look in the Dayton area. I didn't really want to commute to Cincinnati or Columbus because that sounded very soul-sucking and not fun. So I work at Bowser Warner Incorporated. We're a engineering consulting firm in Dayton. We're up in Huber Heights, if any of you are familiar, Taylorsville Road, right near 70. This company's been around over 100 years. It was founded in 1911 as a testing lab. We have offices in Dayton, Toledo, and a small office in Springfield, but our main office is in Dayton. And generally, we're known kind of around the country for our testing labs. We do a lot of testing of aggregates, concrete, asphalt, soils, like everything kind of construction material related. So we have a couple different departments. Field services, as people are out on construction sites doing field testing, nuclear density gauge stuff, more civil engineering type technology work. The testing labs, like I mentioned, soil testing for pre-qualification for building, different aggregate testing for strength, and all sorts of things I'm not super familiar with. But we also have a calibration department, so we're calibrating different instruments that people send us. And then we also have a radon reference lab, which is something to do with radon instruments. We're really well known for it, but again, I don't know too much about that. But what I do know about is my department, which is engineering and environmental services. Take a drink here. So my department is really just engineering and environmental consulting. So not just like what you might think of when you come to environmental consulting, but a lot of, for the civil engineering major here, geotechnical engineering and civil engineering, environmental engineering. So here are the main industries that we work in at my company, at least in my department right now. We've been in the C&D industry for a long time. And so what that is construction and demolition debris. So things like hard fill or concrete, drywall, roof shingle, scrap metal, it all has to go somewhere. It's waste. Or it needs to be recycled. And so we do a lot of permitting and all sorts of work that I'll talk about in C&D landfills. Those became regulated in Ohio in 1997. So after that, there's all sorts of rules they have to follow and different things they have to do to remain in compliance. So you can kind of compare this to a solid waste landfill. So if you're thinking of like Rumpke or the one down in Dayton, that's like where all your typical trash goes. This is only for like construction debris. So it's limited to what you can deposit there. Along with C&D landfills, we have C&D processing facilities. These are typically smaller, and someone's basically bringing in this waste and they're sorting it, trying to recycle it and sell it to a secondary market. Like something like scrap metal or concrete hard fill can probably be reused. So why not try and make some money on it instead of just putting it in the landfill? Because you have to pay to put something in a landfill. And then some of our landfills actually also have what we call co-located C&D processing facilities, which means they have an area where they're doing processing and sorting in the landfill. And those are permitted a little separately than the standalone processing facilities, and that they're just an addendum to their license application instead of a completely separate application. So it's been really fun for my company because these processing facilities just became regulated in 2022. So right when I started, everybody's running around learning all these rules and trying to help all these people that are calling saying, I have this processing facility, I need all this help to like meet the requirements. So those are kind of the main industries we work in, but we also have other environmental clients that come up. Welding facilities, maybe a factory or a plant that has some sort of sampling need. So that's kind of basically an overview of the kind of people I work with. And then all of my work is pretty much within Ohio. I've only been out of the state like once for a job. And a lot of our clients are actually in Northeast Ohio, in that Akron, Canton, Cleveland area. And so you came here and you're like, great, she's going to talk about landfills. So first of all, if you're going into environmental consulting, you're probably going to be dealing with waste in some sort of way because we have to protect the environment, right? And we have waste no matter whether we like it or not, there's waste. We have to manage it somehow. So environmental consulting, a lot of that work is figuring out how to meet the regulations and manage that waste properly. But I also wanted to show you guys some pictures I've actually taken at these landfills. So some of our landfills are actually closed sites, but there's monitoring that's required a few years after that, at least. So that's like an example of one of our closed landfills. There's a stream that I sample, I think, some cows near one of our landfills. I always say hi to them. Some ponds, and I've got 2 snakes here that I've met. They're really cute. Isn't that cool? Turtle. Yeah, my coworker picked him up. I was like, put him down. He's not very happy. So yeah, so landfills, but there's also some cool stuff you get to see along the way because you get to be outdoors. And consulting is a great job if you like being outside. So now I'm going to kind of go into what I might do on a day-to-day basis at my job based on both office work and field work. So for our landfills, or mainly our landfills, they have these license renewals due in September of each year. So that's our busy office time. And that kind of includes design plans, engineered plans, where you're kind of mapping the active landfill area and the inactive landfill area. These license renewals require that you have groundwater and leachate data, and I'll go a little more into that later. Another aspect, for example, is a fire department letter. Like you need to have a letter from the fire department saying, hey, if there's a fire at my landfill, you're going to respond. Like they know that there's a landfill there and that there's a risk of fire. Because unfortunately, fires do happen at these landfills occasionally, just when you've got a lot of this debris that, can be ignited. And then some other stuff we have to work with the client with is they have to set up credit to have post-closure care, financial insurance in case they close, who's going to have the upkeep of the landfill. Some other work we do kind of on the engineering side is modification and expansion to the licenses. So for example, some of our landfills, what will happen is they'll kind of have a 4-to-1 slope design for their fill area, and we'll make an adjustment. We'll request a modification that, the health department or whatever entity has to approve to change that to 3-to-1 slopes. So if you've got 4-to-1, you're going to 3-to-1, that increases your landfill space, that increases the amount of waste you can receive, ultimately increases the life of your landfill. And then another thing that can be involved with this, especially if there's a new site, I haven't done much with this, but site characterization, which might be of interest to the geology majors here, where you're looking at the subsurface geology of the site. Maybe is it located in a floodplain, or if it might affect nearby aquifers or something like that. So with my job, there is a bit of different permitting aspects of it, where we're these landfills require air permits, water permits, different things. The one thing that I've actually been working on a lot recently that I really enjoy is air permit applications. So For example, at these landfills, there's different we call them emission units, different ways that you might have dust or other pollution in the air. Typically, it's dust, fugitive dust, like from the roads and stuff like that. And that kind of requires some Excel calculations and different things. So let me go. So for example, here we have storage piles, material handling, unpaved roadways, and landfills. So if you kind of see here, this will be the roadway. You have to have a permit for that and different things you have to do such as watering when it's dry to meet the permit. We can pretend there's a storage pile up there, but there isn't really in this picture. And then material handling, like that process. And then also there's stormwater permitting and compliance. Some of you, I don't know if maybe you've heard about this, but NIPDES is National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which is a federal system, but that gives authority to the states to basically manage stormwater pollution, make sure a site isn't polluting, doesn't have stormwater that's going into a stream, causing degradation of that stream, for example. So this is an example, one of our sites I did a stormwater walk around. So here's a great story with this is silt fence around to prevent sediment from getting in. Some of this involves something called a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is something actually in the rule that you have to develop. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it. Basically, track where stormwater is going on your site and how you're going to prevent it from either going off site or prevent sediment from going into it. So I've helped with those a little bit, just kind of on more of the organizational side, not necessarily the engineering design side. So that's kind of a lot of the more office side of things. But then when it comes to field work, primarily what I do is groundwater sampling and other surface water sampling. So these CNDD landfills are generally required to conduct groundwater monitoring annually, and the reports are due in September. And depending on the site and its geology and a lot of other things, there's different numbers of wells. So one of our sites has like 20 wells and one has like 3. And I'll talk a little bit more about the process of sampling those. And then leachate sampling, landfill leachate. It's different than what you would expect at a solid waste landfill, but it does produce leachate. We have different leachate samples we do, depending on the landfill, quarterly or annually. What we're typically sampling for in this water is different chemicals, metals, inorganics, such as like sulfate or phosphorus, and then volatile organic compounds, things like acetone, vinyl chloride. There's a whole list of them. Sorry, I'm talking too much. And then occasionally, depending on the site and maybe a municipality's requirements, we might do surface water sampling, sampling a stream or a pond outfall, which this is an example of here. Actually, I think I took a picture of this because we actually couldn't take a sample because it was dry. We had a really dry fall, so we had to go back and it was stayed. But if there's no water coming out of the outfall, can't sample it. So I want to talk a little bit about groundwater sampling here. There's a lot going on here, but I kind of wanted to give you an overview of what a typical sample looks like. Back behind here is actually the monitoring well. It's got a pipe about 2 inches in diameter, I think it is. And then there's a few things here. This is the backpack regulator. We have carbon dioxide here that's carrying a bladder pump. There's a rope here attached to that. Here's a bucket where we're collecting our water. Here's a water level tape that's measuring the depth of the water. It actually makes a beeping sound when you hit it. So you know if your well's drawing down too much when you're pumping water. And then this here is a flow through cell. It's kind of cool. You basically connect it to the water down here. The water is being pumped from the well, goes through here, and it comes out into the bucket. And it's doing continuous measurements of things like pH, conductivity, turbidity, and dissolved oxygen. And these are what we call our stability parameters. And basically we have to make sure that we're pulling in water from the actual aquifer, not just from what's in the well right now. And so we have to wait till those parameters are all stable and not changing before we can actually put water into the bottles, which are here. And then we ship those off to a third-party lab for analysis. This is just another example of a sample I took It was actually a leachate sample that's being discharged from a landfill to a publicly owned treatment works or like a sewage treatment plant. And I was taking a composite sample, which basically meant every 15 minutes I was taking a sample with the graduate cylinder and then pouring it in there and then using that, actually collecting that as a sample. That was a fun job because I got to just sit in the shed. But it's done now, so I can't do it anymore. Now this is the part this is the part of my job my dad likes to talk about at parties. We do drone topography, so I'm a drone pilot. I have a drone license. It's the Part 107, regulated by the FAA. So here's a video I took flying a drone. It's pretty cool. It's like a little bird. Cool. So I actually brought in a drone today to just kind of show you guys. This is called an EDX, made I believe in Switzerland. This is a fixed plane drone. So basically to fly, you just take it, turn it on. It's actually connected to a computer and that controls the flight. It's all automated. You take it 3 times and when it's at full speed down here with the propeller, you just chuck it up in the air. I'm not kidding, that's how you use it. There's a camera in here that kind of is underneath and then it takes pictures as it flies. And then there's a battery here. And you know how it lands? Crash lands on its stomach. Why? I don't know. But it's good for topography. So basically you're flying a site and you're taking like hundreds of pictures as it flies. And then we use this program to mesh it all together and make an aerial image. And what it also generates are contour lines and a digital terrain model in front of you. Might be familiar with that if you're taking GIS or something. But basically, we can get a 3D model of the landfill. And so we know exactly on that date, what was the topography of that landfill. And this is important because I believe most sites have to be flown annually if they're an active site, or they need topography annually. Some people can do it by planes, but this is usually cheaper. And what you can do is see, okay, what is the design of the landfill? What is my boss, who's a landfill engineer, he's designed a landfill, right? This is what the slope's supposed to be. This is what the elevation's supposed to be right here. How close is that to what we flew? So that's a good way for them to know, have I overfilled? Have I not filled enough? How much space do I have? From this, we can calculate a compaction ratio of like how much is the waste being compacted, how much airspace is remaining. And that basically can also tell them the lifespan of the landfill, how much life it has left before they have to close, or do they need to build a new cell, different things like that. And it also produces this really cool aerial image. And we use a software called Pix4D, and it kind of meshes all of this data from those photos. And it takes like a few days to do the whole process because there's a lot of processing power involved. So this is actually a flight I did back in November. I'm zoomed into a part of one of our landfills that we do work for. And so you can see here, this area is kind of done. It might be capped soon, but then they're filling all over there. There's these different roads here. And then here is pretty much the same area, but in a engineering drawing. So you can kind of see the elevation here up. You can see the roads here that were in that previous image. There's some other information here that's not relevant, but you can kind of go back and forth and see picture, drawing. I think it's pretty cool to kind of, especially when you do the processing, to go from the beginning of flying it to the processing and getting your end product and getting a cool picture. Okay. So then some other kind of on the engineering side of what I do is sometimes I do some surveying. I'm not a licensed surveyor, so we'll just basically do this at our landfills to stake cuts and fills. So we might get a topo and realize, oh, wow, you're really overfilled here. So we'll go out and stake that. And for those of you that might not be familiar, if you stake a fill, that means that at this point you need to fill up to this amount of feet to be at your design or at grade. Or if it says cut, that means you need to like take off that amount. So you're basically telling them what they need to do. So I'll do that sometimes. So my coworker will use thermal devices for that. We usually have a survey pool. So if you see people out on the side of the road, it's a similar kind of thing. Sometimes we'll also mark boundaries, so we're not really looking at an elevation, but we're like, okay, here's the boundary of where you can place your waste, or there was maybe some sort of construction happened. This is then where it was built, and as built. Some stuff I've done too has actually been sort of construction documentation, where I'm basically out there sometimes watching certain construction happening and taking notes, taking pictures, documenting, having the plans with me, making sure the contractors are following them. So a couple things that I've done right when I started, I was out there, they were building a leachate sump for a new cell. So they were adding all these different rocks and the pipe to make sure to filter out the leachate, filter out all the debris before it went to a leachate. And this landfill is a really complex sump system where there's different sumps that'll pump out leachate, and then they can recirculate it to help wet the debris, because you need to keep things wet, or they'll discharge it to the force main. Another thing I did some construction documentation for was the connection of this leachate system to the force main. So basically, this was a leachate tank here. They built this pipe, and it connects to this big main underground. And so now they're able to, they were having too much leachate on site, so they went through a lot of hoops to get a permit to be able to discharge to the city's wastewater treatment plant. So this might be of more interest to the biology students, but I am licensed, or I did receive certification to do wetland delineations. This is actually something my company didn't offer. We have some people that know how to do the permitting side, but they didn't have anybody who had field experience. I work with geologists and civil engineers, and I was this random biologist who came on board. And so in the interview process, I kind of said, oh, I looked on your website. It says wetland delineations. And they said, oh, well, we subcontract out. We don't have anybody with that expertise. And I said, I'd be willing if you can give me the training. So I got the training, and we don't have, I think the jobs are starting to roll in. So we're kind of building something up, and I'm the one person who really knows the field side of it. So that's kind of exciting, a little scary. Last summer I did a class. And so for those of you who are, curious, wetland delineation is basically means you're going out, you're doing a survey, you're determining, is there a wetland on site, and where is the boundary of the wetland? And then you send this off to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they determine if the wetland is jurisdictional or regulated by the federal government. There's a lot of stuff up in the air about what is jurisdictional right now. They haven't released their final ruling. The idea is, I think that they're saying that isolated wetlands are no longer jurisdictional, but in Ohio, isolated wetlands still have to be permitted generally. So I have that there. So there are 3 categories to determine if wetland exists. You look for things like hydrology indicators, such as like leaf stains, evidence that the area is wet a lot. Is there standing water? Is it a low-lying area? Hydric soils, we're using something here like a Munsell soil chart. You're looking at the different colors, you're looking for different hydric soil indicators. Typically it's something called redox, or red spots in the soil that there's iron reduction happening. And then you're looking at the vegetation. There are certain plants that grow only in wetlands, or usually grow in wetlands. For example, you're more likely to find a sycamore tree in a wetland versus like a sugar maple tree or a honeysuckle. That's a good way to tell if there's a wetland or not, because honeysuckle does not go in wetlands. It's actually told in my training. Would be helpful. So this is something that's still pretty new to me and my company. I've been reading up a lot on different things, but I'm very fortunate that my company is allowing me to get training, paying for me to go out and get different certifications, different training, which is super awesome. Okay. So what to expect in consulting? Got a master's degree to work in the snow. Yeah. So typically, it can be a mix of field work and office work, and it depends on your company and your job. So some people are like out all the time. Some people are more office-based, especially if you're on the regulatory side and you're doing a lot of the permitting type of stuff. It depends. Like in the winter, I'm usually pretty much in the office always. In the summer, it can be more out in the field. I think last July, I was in the office like 4 days, but I was also like doing a lot of different trainings, and then I went on vacation. So, you might potentially have long field days and overnight travel. For me, I think my longest day, I'm actually pretty lucky. My longest day was like 12 hours. It will be 12 hours, and that's typically a situation where we're driving to Northeast Ohio 4 hours, doing a 3-hour job, and then driving back. So that's pretty lucky. I know people who have much longer days. I do some overnight travel. Typically we'll combine jobs. But the longest I've ever been gone is like a Monday through Friday. That's only for like one job. And your company will be paying for your hotel and you'll be comped for food. You'll get a per diem or your food will be reimbursed when you travel. You should expect to work in all weather and insect conditions. For example, in the snow, I've actually been really lucky with weather. My boss is really jealous because I always just get really nice weather for field work. So it hasn't been too bad on that front. You might deal with insects. We once got bombarded by mosquitoes. I did not get a single tick last summer. I don't know how that didn't happen. I saw one on the truck. I don't know. That was extremely lucky. Lots of mud, a lot of mud. If you are afraid of mud, consulting or anything outdoors might not be for you. I will say there's some good opportunities that are faced with different agencies. For example, we interface a lot with the Ohio EPA, local health departments, local municipalities. And then you're also able to help your clients comply with the regulation. A lot of our clients are these landfills are family owned. They're not large businesses. They're pretty small. So it's kind of cool to get to know like the actual owners of the business or the people on site. And they're just trying to have their business. And so you're just helping them to make sure that they're following the rules and they're doing everything they're supposed to, because they probably don't have the expertise or the time to deal with all of this regulatory stuff that's required. So they bring us in, take care of that for them. And I will add, there are a lot of jobs in environmental consulting out there, especially if you're willing to look around. A lot of companies work on gas pipelines, just all sorts of different things. Environmental consulting, as you can see, can be pretty broad, pretty interdisciplinary. Unfortunately, when I was in undergrad, people were asking me, well, what are you going to do with your degree? You're studying environmental biology. And so now you have an answer. You can go into consulting. And I wasn't a geology major, so I didn't really know what you could do with a geology degree. I work almost exclusively like with geologists. So if you're a geology major, like there's a lot of jobs in consulting, especially when it comes to like, if you're out on a drill rig, hydrogeologic investigations. Like I said, I work with a lot of geotechnical engineers, so that's kind of a combination of geology and civil engineering. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of wanted to leave off with some advice. I myself am an early career scientist. So internships are awesome. I'm really glad that the EVB program requires you to have an internship, because like that experience, I mean, going to class is great. You should definitely go to class, but like the experience you get hands-on, like working at a job, is like absolutely invaluable. Or research experience is also really valuable. I would recommend that you're willing to go outside of your comfort zone and learn new skills. I went into this job and I had the experience of knowing how to sample and do field work, but I actually had to learn a lot of new things. Luckily, my company was willing to like teach me all of that. But I'm doing very different stuff than I did maybe in undergrad or grad school, but it's good to learn new things. I would say creativity is critical for success in field work. Learn how to troubleshoot and critically think, because something's going to go wrong and you're going to be like, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. How do I fix this equipment that's acting up? That's something I really learned in grad school, because when you have you're trying to do behavioral experiments with little zooplankton, it's challenging and can be very frustrating, but you learn how to be creative. I think that's really important. See how your unique skill set might benefit your company or working group. I came in and was like, I'm this biologist. They call me the bird nerd, like this random person with all this experience. But like, because I had that field botany class and this interest in field work, we're able to expand our services and offer new things, which is really great, especially when it was something we had to subcontract out. Now, if we can do it in-house, that's great. I think it's important to kind of weigh your job options versus your location. If you're willing to, move somewhere, I think that's good. You might get your dream job, right? But if you're more, geographically limited, you might have to be more broad and looking for what you want. Not used to talking this much. Then the last thing, grad school. A lot of people ask, should I go to grad school? I think it depends on what you want to do. My job, I would not have needed a graduate degree for, but I'm sure it gave me the experience that helped me to be successful. Maybe might have helped with my promotion. I'm not quite sure. I mean, go out the gate with a bachelor's degree, you might be able to get a really like a normal 9-to-5 job. You might be doing seasonal like field tech work. You might go to grad school. There's positives and negatives to both. I will say if you're going to grad school, make sure that they are paying you. You're getting a TA ship or something. Unfortunately, a lot of schools are not great about funding grad students right now. That's a topic for a later time, but make sure that they're going to pay you a living wage and that you're going to get support and tuition remission. Thanks to Dr. McEwen for making sure I had that, even though Miami tried to take our funding away the whole time. Just the summer funding, because who needs money during the summer? That's being recorded. It's fine. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm kind of on social media, on LinkedIn. It's 2 different names. My maiden name was Little. My last name is now Murrin. That's my work email. If you want to reach out to me, you can visit our website. My company's on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. I do have business cards here. I'm happy to hand out if you're wanting to get in contact. I just ask that my cell number's on there. I just ask that you don't contact me on my cell number. I'm not just there because sometimes we're out of the office. But yeah, I think that's all, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Imagine a lot of things being like due in September. Would you say that's a
September's a busy office month. I was still kind of learning things, so it was more, I guess, busy for some kind of my bosses and some of the higher people. I was just kind of assisting where I could. Field work wise, this past year, May and June were really busy. But yeah, I mean, winter is pretty slow, and then it kind of starts to pick up. Like in March, I'll be out like 2 weeks in a row. Not the whole week, but. And it depends. Some of our jobs are semi-annual, some of them are quarterly. We don't have any monthly jobs right now, I don't think. Some of them are annual, so it just kind of depends on how often the job is. Yeah.
How often were you like water
Yeah, so water stuff is probably the majority of what I do. In the winter, it's like pretty slow right now. But like I said, in like March, I'll be doing like 2 or 3 jobs in 1 week dealing with water. One will be a landfill inspection. The next week I'll have another job with groundwater. But it's probably the majority of the kind of field work I do. Yeah. Yes.
So do you plan to, you think you'll stay in environmental consulting? Is that going to be your long term?
Yeah, I'm not sure right now. Obviously, like down the line when we have kids, that's going to be something to kind of figure out a little bit because you can't really travel with a newborn. So it just depends on how that all works out. But right now I'm liking it. Yeah. 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 Yeah, they were willing to, train me, like my boss trained me in like all the groundwater stuff and made sure I was good to go before I went out kind of as a field lead with someone else. And then they've paid for a lot of different trainings, like my drone license. Recently got a certification to do asbestos sampling. Actually registered today for a QHEI course for the wetlands. So yeah, your company should be paying for things that you don't have that you need. That shouldn't come out of your pocket. Yeah.
I don't know a lot just how this one is. And do you
It depends. Yeah, we do handle a lot of like the permitting aspect for our clients, like especially the landfills. Like we'll do their air permits, their NIPDs, their stormwater permits. I'm trying to think of what else might come up. Their their landfill license applications, that's a license. I'm involved in some of that in different areas. I have kind of taken on some of the air permitting more, kind of doing most of it myself and learning a lot through that. But yeah, we're mainly doing like air permitting, and that's fugitive dust, stormwater. We're looking at like, okay, what's, stuff coming off of the materials. We're not doing smokestacks or things like that typically. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Typically in the winter, it's like 40. Like I'm not going over 40. In the summer, sometimes it's a little more. I think the longest week I've worked is like 45. So not too bad. And sometimes, you know, if we have a lot of field work, like I can leave early on a Friday. I mean, my husband says I don't, but he only has to work 20 hours a week right now because he's in school and he's spoiled by the base. So, you know, but I'm not an aerospace engineer. So they're suffering on the other side, I guess. I don't know. He's actually here. He actually is getting his master's at UD right now. So he's at KO on Mondays and Wednesdays. Yeah. We met at UD, by the way.
Anything else? Yeah, let me just share that, Michelle's a very supportive person in general. I think, you know, if you haven't any interest in environmental consulting, I would encourage you to just like walk down here and talk to her right now. She could be a really important resource and asset for your future. So I just want to say that, she's inviting you to email her. I just wanted to reinforce that she's definitely a positive person. And with that, let's just thank Michelle for coming.
Thank you. That snap pad is probably my cat. It is my cat. He's really cute.